Yeah, Mum's here with me, so she's one screen less. I know Lisa's doing GCSEs adjudication. So
Ah, I'll mute my.
joy. All the kids are in it to win it for the end of the term. It's quite funny, isn't it? I just thought, oh, that's me, but I'm not a kid. I have got exams, so you can expect throughout the end of May and June for everything to be all about de-stressing and calming the nervous system. So you can hang around for that one. It will all be how do we process stress? So I've no idea what we're doing today because I taught yesterday, so my brain is a bit empty. um, let's have a think and see what happens. So we just start as we usually do. All the animals can come in.
Ah,
Mum's going to get accosted by Mary today. That's good. Your novelty, that's what it is. So we're just thinking about the long feet. And we were working a little bit yesterday on pelvic alignment and how do we find that? So, and it starts with the feet. We need balance through the feet between heels and toes. And, you know, as the feet present to the floor, we could just start to feel how they are initially. So we might have one foot that's heavier than the other. We might have one foot that's slightly rolled out onto its side. We might have a foot that's slightly rolled in. We might have both feet slightly rolled in. So just exploring the landscape of the foot and the weight of the foot, and how does the front of the ankle, top of the foot feel? Can we make that heavy? And we start to think about this real deep center of the foot, so sort of that front of the ankle through the foot, where on the inside we've got probably the highest part of the internal arch. And can we have a lengthening that happens from the inside of the heels through to the big toe joint? And from there, the rest of the toes, the second, third, fourth, and fifth toes can just fan out. And they fan out from the front of the ankle. So we start to rework how we imagine toes to be in the pictures in our mind. So it may be worth just picking the toes up off your mat, just lifting and spreading. And we start to feel that there's an even weight between heels and toes. And when we connect this to the freedom of the knees, so if we give the knees a nice wave, sort of out to the sides and back in again, back in towards the center line, we start to feel that the hip flexors on the front of the hip can just let go a little bit, and that gives a freedom to the pelvis. So the pelvis is allowed to roll away. So can we make the sit bones nice and heavy? And just start to notice how, when we've got these heavy sit bones and the pelvis starts to, we think of the back of the pelvis, if we think of the top of the Mickey Mouse ears, so you can put your hands around there and just notice where they are. So that sort of top back of the hip bones would be the heel, and as you roll through the heel into the toes, you can feel that the toes would be the sit bones. So we've got this kind of footprint in the back of the pelvis. So the more we feel the toes, the more there's a pull with the sit bones. And if we press with the heels, and you try this for yourself, if you press with your heels, you'll feel the pelvis roll in towards you. And when we pull down with the toes, you feel the pelvis roll away from you. And it's just noticing how that feels within the pelvis, but also how that starts to affect the low spine. So can we start to touch in with those connections from the from the sacrum? You know, we've got this drawbridge of the sacrum that rolls away. And also, if we press with the heels, the sacrum can roll in towards us. So it's a little bit like a drawbridge, just moving backwards and forwards. We might notice that one hip is heavier on the floor than the other. That might correspond with the weight of the feet as well. It's just interesting to notice these things. There's not much to do about them. It's just to notice that they're there. So we might start to feel that there's a spaciousness that starts to open up between the sacrum and the iliac bones. You know, there's a joint there that sometimes can get a little bit caught up. So we can just allow that to become a little bit more spacious, a little bit softer. So the more the pelvis tilts away, the deeper the lumbar curve will become. The more we push into the heels and tilt the pelvis under, the longer the lumbar curve becomes. Can we explore that movement? And it may be that having the palms of the hands on the ribs at the front and just letting the weight of the hands rest. On the front of the ribs. When the pelvis moves, because we want the pelvis to move independently of the ribs. So we find that with the weight of the hands on the front of the ribs, when the breath comes in, it causes the ribs to go broad. And we can feel that the lung expansion in the back of the body is more outwards and backwards than it is into the front of the chest. And we know that there's not much lung tissue in the front of the chest. It's all heart and the heart tent, pericardium. So the breath is important because when we breathe in and we breathe broad, the diaphragm descends, it comes down into the abdominal cavity. It's chatting, literally chatting to the organs underneath. So liver, stomach, pancreas, gallbladder, all of that stuff is all chatting away underneath there. And because it's connecting to the organs there, and of course the organs are all tied off into the spine, as the diaphragm comes down, there's a lengthening that happens. It starts from the top of the lumbars where the ribs finish and the lumbar spine starts. And we might feel that the spine behind the solar plexus starts to get a little bit of space. QL muscles get a little bit of length from this movement as well. And we're just consciously letting the drawbridge of the sacrum and the heavy sit bones just to roll down towards the back of the feet. And there's a heaviness that happens into the toes and the balls of the feet as a result. So it's subtle, but we feel that there's on the in-breath, we feel that whilst there's a broadening to the rib basket, there's an elongation that happens to the waist. So that space between ribs and the top of the hips. And this helps structures to support the inside of the spine, but it also helps to give the spine, the lumbars, a little bit of space, and they can get a bit squashed in our day-to-day up and moving about and sitting in chairs and all of that stuff. It's not great for lumbars because they tend to get a little bit compressed. So this is a great decompression movement. If you've been out, you know, lots of us have been out Londoning, and the concrete, you know, when we're walking a lot on concrete, that causes compression to the lumbars. So this is a great decompression tool that you can use if you know that you've been out walking on the hard surface. So if we take the elbows, we leave the hands on the base of the ribs, we take the elbows sort of out to the sides and just let the elbows rest on the ground. When we breathe into the ribs, we're going to hold the front of the ribs, just gently encourage them to stay where they are. We breathe into the ribs. You'll feel the shoulder blades lift up towards the ears. Might be a bit sticky in the thoracic spine, but we let the shoulder blades come up. The shoulders start to come up towards the ears. We keep breathing in. We've got that nice length to the lumbars. And then the breath out just lets the shoulders drop away from the ears. And there's a ripple effect that goes all the way down the inside of the spine, right to the tail. So just trying that a few times. That lovely breath in. But because of just the weight of the hands, or the presence of the hands on the front of the ribs, it sends the breath into the back of the body and creates lots and lots of space. The breath out when the shoulders drop also gives length to the neck spine. So it might be nice to just roll the head towards one ear and to the other side. And we're looking for that connection down through the back of the head into the top of the shoulder. You know, neck into shoulders for many of us is just a little bit snug there. So if we imagine the ear being really, really heavy, ears that are made of lead, and that just pulls you down. So we feel that there's the connection from the earlobe almost all the way out to the very, very tip of the shoulder. But we're mindful not to flatten the curve of the neck. So the jaw is still free, the chin is still free to float up towards the sky. So the next time we come back to the center, we're going to let the left ear become nice and heavy, we can roll through the back of the head and create that connection from the ear out to the shoulders. The shoulders are nice and heavy, the elbows into the ground nice and heavy, and we can just wander down the inside of the spine. There's a broadness to the back of the ribs, and then the feet can pull down into the ground. And when we pull the feet down into the ground, we feel that the legs can drop back through the hips and reconnect to the waist. And when we reconnect to the waist, then the legs plug in to where just underneath the hands, and the feet can pull down into the ground and take the knees in the opposite direction to the head. So the head is going left and the knees are going right. Can we feel the different rotations that start to happen? Of course, there's a lot of rotation up in the neck spine. Not much happening between the shoulders because they're staying on the ground. But lower down in the ribs, there starts to be some rotation that will take us into the top of the lumbars. And then there's, small degrees of rotation until the pelvis is rolling onto its side and the knees are coming over to the side. So the knees probably won't get to the ground, and that's okay because we're pulling down through long little toe side on the underside foot and the big toe joint in the inside of the heel on the top foot. But we keep the legs plugged into the waist. So all the rotation is coming from the base of the ribs, very, very top of the lumbars. And this is great for the organs because it gives the organs a nice ring out. We're going to pull the feet into the ground, pull the back of the head into the ground, which brings us back to neutral. We can reset ourselves and let the head lead. We're very used to the feet and the legs driving this one, but can we let the head lead? So there's right ear, really heavy all the way down. When we really let the head go, we can feel any connections that are caught up in the side of the neck, top of the shoulder. We breathe broad into the ribs and then allow the legs just to start to affect the rotation in the waist. So there's a twizzle in the waist, and it's predominantly the solar plexus. This is great for gallbladders. And can we come in with no expectation, because we've already done one side? So can we come in with no expectation as to how this side will behave comparatively to the other side? And again, the knees might not get to the floor, and it's a good thing if they don't, because it helps us to continue to reconnect the legs through the hips into the deep waist, because the legs don't finish at the hip, they finish at the diaphragm. Just let the back of the pelvis and the back of the head, that sacrum and occiput that talk to each other all the time, they bring us back to the center, and they can be the drivers of our movement. So if we let the drawbridge of the sacrum lengthen away, if we let the drawbridge of the occiput, that big sugar spoon, scoopy bone at the base of the skull, just roll away, it takes the nose up towards the sky and the chin up towards the sky a little bit. And these bones are really important because they help us to orientate the spine, but also to they're the monitors of the secondary curves, the curve in the neck and the curve in the lumbars. And we want them to be, the sacrum is a roof to the pelvis, and the occiput is like a support to the back of the skull. We don't want them to be back walls, because when they're flattened and they're acting as a back wall to the body, they flatten the secondary curves of the spine. And like I say, we can use those as drivers. So hopefully you're following along with the rotation on both sides. Because I forgot to cue it. And when we come back to the centre, and you can take your time here, we're going to come over onto whichever side is comfortable for you, and come up into our lovely square pose. And just taking your time here. So again, just like we were doing when the soles of the feet were on the ground, the top of the feet are no different. We find the balls of the feet and the big toe joint, and the more the balls of the feet can be drawn away. So if we draw the feet in, not so that the toes tuck under, but so that we can find the top of the toes on the ground. And this may be where your sticky mat becomes more of a hindrance than a help, but see how you go. We won't stay here very long because it takes you quite strongly into the front of the knee, which isn't very nice. But we feel that the tops of the toes can be pulled away, and noticing how the front of the knee changes in response to the foot being drawn away. So you feel, if we are on the tops of the toes, the ankles are off the ground, that kind of pushes the body weight forwards into the knees. So if we feel that the toes can be drawn away, gravity buttons underneath the front of the ankles, and that pulls them down into the ground. It takes the sit bones and the body weight back. We're looking to drop the body weight into the center of the shin. So it's further back than you think it is, and it feels like you're sticking your bottom out. Because for most of us, the pelvis is tucked under, so what feels straight or feels aligned, and it can show this on the screen. So for me, what feels normal is probably about here, and you can see I've got a nice round back of the pelvis, and I've flattened my lumbar curve, and it feels good because my tummy muscles are engaged, so everything tells me that I'm doing it right. But also you can see that my ankles have left the floor. So if I pull my ankles down into the ground and get drawn back by the sit bones, again, we've got that drawbridge, which has now been turned on its head, but that drawbridge of the sacrum lengthening away. So if the standing hand will tolerate it, you can pop the back of your hand on the back of your pelvis as a monitor. You can do this with yoga blocks as well. Maybe we'll do that next week. You can do this with a yoga block as well, because when the pelvis is tucked under, your block will just slide off. So we're looking for that thing where the sacrum is invited into the spine, into the lumbars. And again, like I say, it feels like you're sticking your bottom out. It's great to do in front of a mirror because it can be quite revealing as to where you think you are in space, or what feels right, and where you actually are. So it's worth a look on that one. So like I say, when the sit bones feel like they're getting pulled back towards the wall behind you, it brings us down through the centre of the shins and lengthens out through the ankle into the foot. So from here, what we could do is just keep following that sit bone draw back towards the wall behind you, and it will take you back towards your child pose. But we keep the back of the pelvis very broad, and we retain the space at the top of the leg, front of the hip. So we're not collapsing down. And it feels like I say, it feels like you're sticking your bottom out because we're keeping the sit bones high and we're keeping the sacrum connected to the low spine rather than rounding it out. If it's possible to do it with a hand on the back of the pelvis, you can. You need more feet. The more the feet come into the ground, the more the legs connect into the deep waist, and then the hands aren't needed on the ground. It's just showing off having no hands at all, but the hands aren't needed at the front of the body. So for those of us that when we're in our square pose, the wrists are grievous, it's usually because we're throwing too much body weight forwards into the hands. And the rib basket is just sitting on the top of the shoulders, and that gives us a lot of downward force, which isn't useful. So it's the pull of the feet down into the ground. And we can test this. So when we're back in our child pose, we've got space in the back of the knee, space in the front of the hip. We've still got that drawbridge of the sacrum rolling away. So now if we feel that their feet can get really pulled down into the ground, front of the feet, front of the ankles, front of the shins, pull down into the ground, and you can feel that the legs will connect through the pelvis into the deep waist. And a great way to test this is if you press with your big toes and the balls of the feet, it will send the sacrum away. But if you press with your ankles and more of the top of the foot, you can tilt the pelvis under. Really good for getting into those very deep pelvic support muscles. Can we tilt the pelvis under and tilt the pelvis away just by pressing the feet into the ground? So we pull the feet into the ground, keep pulling equally, and that will pop us back up. It's a little bit like those office chairs where you pull the pneumatic thing underneath and you can just, pop up into your square pose. Can we allow the fascial structures to fire so the joints get pulled apart? The bones float within the fascia, so it's just that fascial connection with the muscles as the power, but we're not loading into the joints. And you'll feel this in the inside of the low spine up into the underside of the diaphragm, because that's where the legs plug in. So at the same time, we come back into our child pose. Can we pull the hands down into the ground? It will swing the elbows round so they're looking towards the ground. So we want the eyes of the elbows looking forwards. That broadens the shoulders. The more we keep pointing with the index finger knuckle, pulling down behind the knuckles, we don't move here, we just keep pulling down into the ground. You'll feel the fire up the back of, or the connection, muscle connections, up the back of the arm, into through the underarm and into the side of the ribs. So if the hands pull down into the ground, if we keep pulling the hands down into the ground, we don't move, we don't allow ourselves to be pulled forward, keep following that connection line, Maybe the arms will start to shake, depends on how toned the triceps are. Take you all the way down through the side of the ribs into the side of the waist, and at some point we pick up the legs, and then if we pull the feet down into the ground as well, we can float up into our whatever this is, square pose. And we feel that the spine is suspended between legs and hands, and the whole lot should feel a little bit lighter. And we'll just go through that again. So again, hands and shins get pulled down into the ground. Sit bones get pulled back towards the wall behind you, and that will take you, float you back into your child pose. We start to really feel the shins into the feet. They're long skis at the back of the body. And the knee joint really doesn't get involved in this at all. And start with the hands pulling down into the ground. And start to feel the rotation in the forearms and start to feel the rotation in the long arm bones. It's like the more we pull the hands down into the ground and we follow those rotations of the arms are naturally getting sucked back through, they're spiraling, sucked back through the socket of the shoulders into the side of the ribs and the side of the waist. Just like that, she says. And at some point this will float us back up into our cat pose, and hopefully you're starting to feel a little bit more engagement around the corset of the waist. Because the front of the tummy blends round into the spine at the back. It's like a big sash on the front. And then the whole lot blends into the thoracolumbar fascia at the back. So which is a big diamond shape. So we're looking at those when we work with sliding the spine backwards and forwards. The front of the body is invited into the back of the body as a support. Hopefully this is making some sense. Oh, rest. We need a rest apparently. So rest if you need to. It's good to have somebody here that goes, you know, because I spent a long time going backwards and forwards like this.
Yeah.
I've done it for a long time. Learning to float is tricky stuff. It really is. It gets us into structures in the body that we're not used to being connected to. You know, we were talking a lot yesterday about that nice TheraBand, and we've done this with Dave. We put the TheraBand down the front of his spine, and we're just not used to connecting to those sorts of structures. From that TheraBand on the front of the spine come, you know, deep postural spine supporting muscles. And again, we're not so used to connecting with those either. We get very enamored with the big externals, you know, we love the abs and the obliques and all the other, you know, those big chunky funky muscles. And interestingly, those ones are quite densely innervated, so they're quite easy to feel, whereas the deep posturals are more subtle. They give off a more subtle signal, so we have to develop our interoception to a higher level. This is good. So we're going to come up to standing. So just take the toes in the other direction for a moment. Just allow that to happen. We can introduce toes to the floor. If the knees have absolutely had enough and they're out, that's fine. And you can just find your way up to standing. But if it's nice to take the toes under, a little bit like the cat with the cushions, we can just pad them into the ground and we get a nice stretch through the sole of the foot. And again, keep the sit bones, keeping the sit bones quite high. It is a practice. You know, I hear that so much. People say, "Oh, it feels like I'm sticking my bottom out," and actually, when sometimes we take photos of you in your postures, or when you look at yourself in the mirror, what you feel you look like and what you actually look like can be very different things. You know, they're trying to classify it as flat bottom syndrome. At the moment, everything's a syndrome. And actually there isn't, you know, your glutes can not be working appropriately within the structures, but they're certainly not inactive, because if your glutes were inactive, you just fall on your face. So that's a bit of a fallacy, that one. But we need the pelvic alignment, or the right pelvic alignment for everybody to be working at their appropriate length and their appropriate strength. So we find our way up to standing, and again, stay with the feet on this one. As we find our way up, can we let the feet be pulled down into the ground? So again, we're looking at that front of the ankle, center of the foot, heel gets pulled into the ground, which opens the back of the knee, which fires the leg up into the deep waist. So when we stand up, it feels like we're being picked up from underneath the ribs. And if you don't need hands, if you feel stable enough, if you don't need hands, or you've got one hand on something and one hand, you can just bring that onto your solar plexus, just let the hand sink under the ribs a little bit, and we can sort of mimic that lift. And when we do that, we feel that when the ribs lift, the head comes back into the gravity line, comes into the top of the spine. But when we come up, the pelvis floats underneath, back underneath the head and the ribs where it should be. So we're looking at shifts in the body rather than tilting, if that makes sense. So again, that weight distribution through the feet. If we're back in the heels, the pelvis will tilt under, and we've done this before. The bottom goes flat because we're back into the heels and we tilt under, just like we did when we were laying on the floor. And also, if you put your hands around there, you feel that the lumbar curve gets nice and flat. So if we feel that the body weight can come forwards into the feet, and we get that lift again with the sit bones, it can feel like that, like we're sticking our bottom out. But actually, if we put our hands around, you know, just the backs of the hands resting on the sacrum, we're looking to invite the sacrum into the lumbars. And initially, for the rib flarers among us, I am one, you might find that the ribs go forward. So a hand on the front of the ribs to bring you back in and up. So now we've still got a lumbar curve, we've still got a slightly tilted pelvis, but we've got legs that can hang down from the underside of the ribs. And we start to feel that the feet have to work a little bit harder. So we can march on the spot and then come back to standing. Because I had to think about you, Margaret, this week. The back of my head was ticking away, thinking about, you know, how do we stop those feet from going numb? And all it is just popping little marching intervals, because that will fire everything and get the low spine moving, and then coming back into into feet once again. So find the outer edges of the feet, let them pull down into the ground, and we feel the sides of the body will go long, and it gives us some nice lift. And then we find the big toe joints and the inside of the heels come down into the ground. And again, we're remembering that footprint. So when the big toes come down into the ground, it feels like it sticks the bottom out, and then it's counterbalanced by the pull of the inside of the heels. And you'll feel that on the inside of the hips here. So again, it's just messing around. Nothing is right or wrong until it becomes, you know, a habit, and then it might not be useful going forwards. But let the body weight go back into the heels and tilt the pelvis under. And then let the body weight go forwards into the toes and tilt the pelvis away. So it's just the same as we were doing when we were laying on the floor. But we start to show the brain how connected the soles of the feet are into the pelvic arrangement. Can we let the kneecaps drop? The dropping of the kneecaps always causes a momentary instability, but it sends us back into the feet. We need that. Little march, and then we can find the foot again. So we start to feel, with a little bit of practice, that we are lifting out of the deep pelvis, out of the top of the hips and into the deep waist. And we need this because this is our, you know, I really dislike the words core strength, because that gives us funky ideas about certain sets of muscles, but that this is core strength. Can we feel that we've got this drawing up for sort of from the belly button upwards, and a down, you know, and a drawing down from the belly button downwards? So there's a lot going on in the abdomen, and this is important because it massages our organs and detoxes everything, and, you know, helps with our organ function, creates space to the waist so the organs get some breathing room. This is good. So we're going to take the feet a little bit wider than hip width, and we're going to find the long little toe side, long little toe sides and big toe joints down into the ground. And again, just finding that nice round snooker ball heel. Is there a side that we prefer? Is there an aspect of the snooker ball heel that we prefer? Outer edges or inner edges, something like that. And we want our feet to be very active here. We want the front of the snooker ball heel to be connecting into the toes. So the toes are always feeling the floor. It's interesting. I got not told off. You don't get told off at 45. But when I was at uni, and we were all supposed to stand really, really still, and my feet just don't stay still anymore. You know, there's always shifting and changing, and the lecturer was like, can you stop fidgeting? I'm not fidgeting. Humans are just not designed to stay still, because we know this. As soon as we start to hold ourselves still, there's a really limited range in that, because you know, gravity comes in, and then we start to compress the joints. We want that continual reciprocal relationship with the ground, where we are dropping into the ground and the fascial structures fire to hold us up, and we're dropping into the ground and the fascial structures fire to hold us up, and we're dropping in, you know, it's all the time. We see ourselves in motion all the time. We're not designed to stand still like the poor soldiers outside the palaces and things. And actually their big boots are hiding a really cool secret, because most of them are doing that. So they are in there because they're moving the feet, because we need that, you know, it's vital for our circulation. If we haven't got that milking action coming through the back of the calf, sending the fluid flow back to the heart, we're going to be in trouble really quickly. So feet are designed to feel the floor. So and particularly when we've got our feet in a funky arrangement, can we feel each side? Notice how we are around the top of the leg and the connections into the pelvis, particularly this groin area, sort of interior pelvis to the inside of the thigh, so that adductor pelvic connection can get a little bit stiff and sticky. So can we take the hips from one side to the other and just free up the tissues? One side might be slightly stickier than the other. I can definitely feel it on the right today. And again, noticing if the pelvis is tilted under, how that affects the pelvis at the top of the hips. And if the pelvis is tilted away slightly, how does that affect at the top of the hips? And we're looking for that neutral place. And it's different for everybody because your ball and socket arrangement and angle and all of the other things completely unique to you. We have a rough idea of a ball and socket, but it's unique to absolutely everybody, you know, where that socket is on the ilium and how the femoral head, or the top of the thigh, connects with that. So you're looking for your optimum range, and it is in there somewhere. It's in there somewhere. So we're bringing the feet back to the center, just marching on the spot for a second. And then we're going to come down to sitting. And again, just making sure that you are comfortable. So maybe a cushion underneath you or a sofa at your back or whatever feels good. And finding the pelvis, for me, the legs start crossed inwards so that I can find the sit bones and then the feet come out, but that's my personal preference. So it may be that you start with the feet out and find the heels down into the ground, and that's absolutely fine too. So again, heel gets pulled down into the ground, backs of the knees just off the ground to start with. We want that space because we want the gravity button, that deep weight, or that weight into the back of the knee. Because as the heels pull down, draws the shin away, pulls the back of the knee open, and then conversely, the long thigh bones are then sent back into the sockets. You can have the hands somewhere around the back of the thighs if that helps. And we're looking for sit bones. We go bump, bump over the sit bones and just start to sit somewhere towards the pubic bone. The pubic bone can be drawing down into the ground. And then we can just work with those deep connections of the legs into the pelvis. So sitting does a lot. When we have had if I go this way, when the pelvis is being tucked under and the spine has been flattened out, the connections between the sit bone and the hamstrings get shortened. So we start small with to give them a break. And the sit bones get pulled down, which starts to affect the pelvis and put the lumbar curve back in, and then the legs can extend from there. So we've got that pull down through the heel. It's of a nature that we could actually pull our mat towards us if we wanted to. Good morning. Yes. Because again, the drop of the heels, which connects the legs through the hips, brings us back into the deep waist. And again, this gets us into, core strength. The structures on the front of the lumbers start to pull in and up. And it takes us up underneath the ribs. Now, if the hip flexors are grievous, and they may be, just bring the legs in towards you, give the knees a hug, give the leg, you can cross the legs, all of that stuff. And then, we can come in and out of the posture. We haven't got the lovely Lisa here with us today, but she's my hip flexor in crime buddy. My right hip flexor doesn't go down without a fight. Even now, it's just not interested in yielding to the obliques in that right side. And hip flexors hold on very tightly. They think they have a job to do when the corset of the waist may not be providing that appropriate upward lift. We feel like we're collapsing down into the pelvis, the hip flexors will hang on because something's going to stop us from rolling backwards. And it tends to be the top of the legs, top of the thighs predominantly. So when we've got that pull down through the heels, we can give the knees a nice wave. And that helps the quads just to stand down a little bit. So we feel the pelvis is like a big, we've talked about this before, but almost like a big ball. Can we explore it a little bit? The edges of the ball. Can we let the pelvis roll, which will bring the whole body forwards, which we want to keep the ribs above the hips as much as we can. We want to keep the head at the end of the spine as much as we can. If it's useful to have a hand on the solar plexus and a hand on the collarbones, then you can. If you know that you've got a funky monkey head that loves to come forwards, I know mine does, you can pop a hand underneath the jaw as well, and just, you'll know when you've got it because the jaw moves back. And the spine feels like it can just hang down underneath the skull. And the hand at the solar plexus just keeps the flaring ribs on the front back in check and allows the lumbers to hang down underneath the ribs. So we keep coming back to this thing that we are not pushing the floor away and going up. We're hanging down from the underside of the skull and the underside of the ribs, and everything is hanging down towards the ground because we've got that reciprocal relationship between the tensegrity network within the body. Gravity pulls us down, fascia pulls us up, and we don't need to do as much as we think we do. Ha 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 ha. Therein lies the paradox. We work far too hard for our movement when actually we're built to do it from point zero. This is good. So we're going to put the hands underneath the knees and just bring the legs back in wherever is good for you. If it's nice to have the knees bent in front of you, or it's nice to cross the legs, whatever feels good. If it's nice to have the legs out in front, just relaxing. I never offer this one because it's my least favorite. If the legs are out in front for me, this happens. It's absolutely terrible. So I like legs in here, but you might not. Find what's nice for you. And we're just going to bring the hands onto the sides of the ribs again. So before we had the hands on the front of the ribs, and we want to just have a memory of that. If the fingers extend far enough around the front of the ribs and the thumb around the back, it's nice to use the fingers just to remind the front of the ribs to come back. But we're breathing into the thumbs and the palms. So we're looking again for the ribs to go out, and we're looking for them to go back. And again, that's sending the breath back into the back of the ribs. Will send the shoulder blades up. And we'll send the lumbers down. And when we breathe out, shoulders can drop away from the ears, and we feel like it's toothpaste of the head and neck coming out from between the shoulder blades and up. So again, what we're feeling is the out breath maintains or supports the lumbar curve and the neck curve, and the breath in just helps to inform and support the inside of the ribs, because there is a curve to the back of the ribs. You know, a lot of us are a little bit flattened on the back of the ribs. We can tend to have ribs that are a little bit flat. So can we let the breath come in there? There's a slight rounding to the ribs without throwing the head forward. And then the shoulder blades can drop, and we start to really feel again that those core connections. And then allowing the breath to return to normal. And we can just notice how the body feels. And staying with any sensations that you might be feeling. Good, and then we're just going to give the fingers and toes a wiggle. Make some rotations with the wrists and the ankles. We can take the arms up over the head and have a nice long stretch through the body. And back to center. This is good. Just noticing how you feel. And thank you very much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure, as always. This is good.
Thank you, Kaz.
You're very welcome.